Okay, so in my previous lecture, I talked about the different kind of factors which influence the population distribution and how those populations can be calculated by the biologist. So there were different kind of formulas that I talked about. So now I'll move to a different topic. So population dynamics. So the study of population dynamics focuses on the complex interaction between biotic and abiotic factors that cause variation in population size. So now there's one important point that one need to remember, that in some areas there is density population is high irrespective of it may be plants or it may be animals, insects, worms, animals. And in some areas, the population density is really scarce. It's very low. So what are the reasons which are leading to this kind of distribution? So there is a kind of interaction between the biotic and the abiotic factors. So now this interaction leads to variation in the population size. So if we look from the broader perspective, so one of the important parameters that we come to realize is that the availability of the temperature, moisture, and nutrients. So that dictates what could be the vegetation, what could be the population of plants, what could be the population of, let's say, the insects or birds or animals which are feeding on those plants and trees, and so on and forth. So if, let's say, the population of animals is large, it may control the population of plants and trees as well, or kind of vice versa. So they will kind of act as a check on each other. So now, depending on, there could be stability in the population or there could be fluctuations. So long-term studies regarding this population, they have challenged the hypothesis that the population of large mammals are relatively stable over time. So it is usually speculated that those large animals, let's say for instance, elephants, tigers, lions, so they are large animals and they are kind of safe from predation. So their population by and large remain stable. However, if these kind of studies has been done for, let's say, a period of 50, 60 or 70 years, then this statement is not correct. So there are a couple of reasons that could be possible. So one of the reasons is the weather and another is the predator population. So these two conditions, they could affect the population of large animals as well. So there's one example, the moose population on Isle Royale. It collapsed during a harsh winter when wolf numbers peaked. So look at this data here. Yeah, so this is one study here. So here you can see on the x-axis we have the number of years. So this particular study has a data from around 1957, 58 something up to 2007 or 10. And this is the number of wolves, which is, and this is the number of moose. So the blue one, it depicts wolves and the red one depicts the moose. So if you look from the initial data, from the initial point, let's say 1957 something, so the number of wolves were a little higher as compared to number of moose. So they kind of, almost there's a similar kind of trend. There's an increase in the number of both the animals. However, the increase in the number of moose was more and there was less of wolves. And here if you see, the wolves are more, moose are less, moose are more, and wolves are less. So it's kind of cycling. So so what does it mean? That when the number of wolves increase, they hunt more. So if they are hunting more, it means the number of moose will go down. So if the number of moose goes down, it means the availability of food will be less. So now because of the less availability of food, now it comes the turn of the wolves. So their number will go down. So if their number goes down, it means we get a downfall in this blue graph. And now since there's less number of wolves to hunt, so those moose which are surviving, now they reproduce. So they reproduce, they flourish. So now their number goes up. Sorry. So when their number goes up, now there's ample availability of food. So now again the number of wolves goes up. So it's kind of cycling thing. Here you can notice. Also, there are other reasons as well. So let's say one of the reasons could be the climatic condition. So it is possible that at some point the climatic condition may vary the moose population. It may vary the reproduction conditions for the moose, or it may vary the reproductive conditions for the wolves. So that will dictate the population of the wolves or the moose. So what does it mean? So it means that it's not only the population of the small organisms which are fluctuating, it is the population of large animals as well that keeps on fluctuating. So if we study for, let's say, 2 or 3 years, we may observe that the population is relatively stable. However, this particular study, if done for longer duration, like 50, 60, 70 years, we may come to a conclusion that that population of bigger animals or bigger mammals is also not stable. It's keep on fluctuating. Okay, so now there's another point which is called the population cycles. So there have been a lot of investigations regarding the population cycles. So some of the population, they undergo regular boom and bust cycles. So by boom and bust cycle means that at some point, let's say some years, there's a boom in the population of that particular animal. So the number increase drastically. And maybe in some years, there's kind of trouble because of which the number goes down. So one can say that the population keeps on fluctuating. So there's one example of this snowshoe hare and the lynx. So lynx population follow the 10-year boom and bust cycle of hare population. So if you look at this particular graph here, so here we have from 1850 to around 1930s. So it's again a graph of 80, 85 years. So here we have the number of hares, which is in the thousand, and here the number of lynx, which are also in thousands. So if you look at this blue graph, which depicts snowshoe hare, so the number of hares are more. So similarly, the number of lynx are more. See, number of hare comes down, the number of lynx also comes down. The number of, again, shoe hare goes up, so lynx also goes up. So one can say from this particular study that the population of hare is kind of dictating the population of lynx. Now, the simple reason that could be cited is that these organisms, they are kind of acting as the food source. So if the population of hare is large, so they are easily available, they are easily predatable. So this lynx population, they can attack these hares, feed and multiply. So now since their population goes up, so that reduces the population of hare. Now since the population of hare is reducing, there is less and less availability of food. Now because of the less availability of the food, the lynx, they will not be able to survive. So their number also goes down. So it's kind of similar kind of pattern. So the population of hare dictates the population of lynx. So now there have been a couple of hypotheses regarding this. So one of the hypotheses that was speculated was that the hare's population cycle follows a cycle of winter food supply. So in the climatic conditions where these animals are living, so there is a cycle where the season changes. So there are clear-cut differentiation between the weather conditions. There's winter, summer, and spring as well as the autumn. So now if there is change in the season, So that would dictate the availability of the food. So it was speculated that in the winters, the availability of food is changing. So now, because of this availability of food, the hare population is changing. So now it was speculated that if this hypothesis is correct, then the cycle should stop if the food supply is increased. So if, let's say, the winters, the conditions are harsh, there's snow, there's the trees or the plants which are not green. So now because of that, the food supply is less. So if somehow some additional food is provided, let's say for example, in experimental conditions, because most of the time we are doing experimental, so we can have some artificial kind of setup, so we can provide food from outside. So additional food was provided to the hares. So now these hare population, if they are giving additional food, it means their population should increase. There should be no effect of the winters on the population. So these did, however, there was no increase in the size. It continued to cycle. Cycle means it keeps on increasing and keeps on decreasing. So one of the point that is clear from this is that the availability of food is not one of the issues for the hare population. Now comes the second hypothesis. So the hare's population cycle is driven by the pressure from the predator. So the population of the lynx is dictating the population of hares. So if somehow the more and more lynx are there, so they will be predating, they will be hunting more and more hares. So to prove this particular hypothesis, the study was conducted where the 90% of hares they were killed by predators. So there were specific number of hares, let's say some thousands or something hares, they were taken and they were isolated in the particular area along with the lynx. So after a couple of months, it was concluded that 90% of the hares they are killed by predators. Only 10% survive. So now we can say that this particular hypothesis too is kind of correct. So the number goes down because of the hunting or because of the predation of the higher animals, that is the lynx. So now comes the hypothesis 3. So the hare's population cycle is linked to the sunspot cycles. So this sunspot cycle means that what is the availability of the sunlight. So the sunspot activity affects light quality, which in turn affects the quality of the hare's food. So if the weather is really cloudy and dark for few days, so it means that the food will not be that good for the hare. The availability will be less. The quality of the food will be poor. So there is a good correlation between the sunspot activity and the hare population. So usually in the winters, the availability of sun is less. In the summers, the availability of sun is more. So in the winters, the population was going down. So now from this point here, we can conclude 2 points. So point number 1 is that the population of hares is driven by the predation. And second, the population is also driven by the sun availability, the sunspot cycle. So all these three experiments, they suggest that the predation and the sunspot, they regulate the hare numbers, and the food availability plays a lesser important role. Okay, so now there is a concept of meta population. So meta population consists of a group of specially separated populations of the same species. So it is quite possible that there is one population which is living in one area. So those populations, now some of the organisms, some of the individuals, they may immigrate to other areas. And it is also possible that some of the population, the emigration may take place. So this both immigration and emigration could affect the number of individuals. Now let's say some of the population, some of the individuals, they have migrated to other areas. So those populations which are in different areas, we call them as the meta population. So it consists of several distinct populations together with areas of suitable habitat. So one important parameter that need to remember about the meta population is that they will be living in those habitats which are suitable for all the different populations, all the different individuals. So in the meta population, in the area, if we talk about the meta populations, so there are small number of individuals, but having almost similar kind of habitats. So until unless they share the similar kind of habitat, they cannot exist in that particular habitat. So these meta populations, they are group of populations linked by immigration and emigration. So both moving out and moving in, that will reflect what is the number of population in that particular area. So population cycle in relative independence of the other population and eventually goes extinct as a consequence of demographic stochastic. Now there are issues like there are the fluctuations that could be causing in the population. So if you remember from the last example, like where people had a speculation that large animals, their population doesn't fluctuate. However, their population also fluctuate. So similarly, the population cycles, they keep on changing. So there is an interdependence. The one population of individuals is kind of dictated by the population of another individuals. So if there is a fluctuation in one population, then it will lead to the disturbance or fluctuation in the another population as well. So the smaller the population, the more chances of inbreeding, depression, and going to extinction. So if we have, let's say, few individuals, some 5-10 individuals living in a specific area, and if some natural calamity, let's say some earthquake, volcanic eruption, or drought happens, then there are chances that those population of, let's say, plants or birds or animals may be totally wiped off. However, if there is large number of population in that particular area, then at least few may survive those adverse conditions, those natural calamities. So high levels of immigration combined with higher survival can result in greater stability in population. So that is one of the reasons that those organisms who want to survive, let's say the one of the major factor that dictates the population is the environmental conditions. So if the organisms of the birds or animals, if they want to survive the harsh winters or harsh summers, either they have some kind of adaptations that they go for, let's say, hibernation, or they go for some kind of migration. So those birds or animals, they move from that harsh weather conditions to the areas, to the zones where the weather conditions are not that harsh, where the conditions are little bit comfortable. So if you remember, I gave one example of this Kevla Dev bird sanctuary, which is in Rajasthan itself. It is in very close to Bharatpur. So there are Siberian cranes. They usually come during winters here. So they are coming from Siberia, the Russian part there. So the winters there are really harsh. The temperatures somewhere touches around -40 to -50. So now you can imagine that the temperatures -40, -50 means that everywhere there will be a lot of snow. And because of that snow, the conditions are such that the availability of food is really less. So, and now imagine that if those birds, they are coming to an area where the temperature is, let's say, around 8 or 10. So for those birds, it's almost like moving to a summer zone. So now they're coming to an area where the availability of food is more, the availability of sunlight is also more. Now because of this, yeah, also one point, in winters, because of the harsh conditions, most of the trees, they lose their leaves. So there are no greenery. So, and also the availability of food is very poor. And now these birds, the Siberian cranes, which are coming to this bird sanctuary, so there the plantation, the vegetation is green. There are a lot of trees, a lot of birds and other insects and worms, and all the the kind of food which is preferred by these cranes is available in abundance. So because of which these animals, they feel that this is a warm, a better climate, and they prefer to migrate to these particular areas. So this is how this movement of the birds plays an important role in the stability of the populations. Now, once the summer comes to those areas, again these birds, they retreat back. They go back to their own native place. So in a way, the population is kind of stabilized if we investigate the population over a longer duration of time. So if we just go and randomly take the samples in winters, of course, we'll see that the number is really low because the most of the birds, they would have migrated. And again, if we take the sample in the summers, then the birds have again come back. So if we count the numbers over a longer duration of time, then we would see that the number is in a stable form. The population is quite stabilized.